Good day viewers and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. Let's talk about the Human League. Beginning back at around 1970 to 78, the Human League started off as a very interesting avant-garde synth electronic kind of band, with vocalist Philip Oakley and keyboardists Ian Craig Marsh and Martin Ware. Martin spelled with a Y because fancy birth names, I don't know. But they began their discography with the very early single "Get Being Boiled," as well as their debut album 1979's Reproduction and 1980's Travelogue. So while these songs and albums were decent, they weren't really enough to gain a big audience with a big profits and sales. So after Travelogue, they decided to kind of redo things over a bit, shift things over, with Ian and Martin leaving the band to form their own group, Heaven 17, while Philip himself carrying on the Human League band name, while bringing in two particular female vocalists, them being Joanne Catherall and Susan Cayley. And as such, they released their 1981 album simply called Dare. And it was a big hit, with singles such as Love Action, The Sound of the Crowd, and Don't You Want Me Baby definitely putting them on the map. And since then, with albums such as Fascination and Hysteria, they were charting a few singles and sales, but weren't really enough to hit that big peak that Dare managed to reach. And around 5 years afterwards, the struggle would definitely show a bit with the album we're talking about today, and that album is simply called Crash. So does this album hold up after 35-ish years, or is it as what the title would say? Was it a mere musical crash? Well, let's dig into the various songs of the Human League's Crash and find out for ourselves. We begin the album with Money, not to be confused with the song of the very exact same name by Pink Floyd from The Dark Side of the Moon. But while that one was sort of an ironic take on greed and fashion and fortune and all that, the Human League's Money seems to be more of a kind of semi-lovish story about the person singing, about how the person they're singing about seems to think that having money is more important than having love or being in a relationship, so the singer kind of just gives up and decides if they want their money, they can just have it all, and how nothing good comes so easily. The best things in life aren't really all that free as one may have thought. So basically, it's a gold digger song before Kanye West's gold digger song. Music-wise, it's your standard 80s synth pop track. It has some decent vocals from Philip himself, as well as the occasional bit from Susan and Joanne, and the synth is pretty much fine with a few imitations of brass here and there, and a bit of a funky bass. But aside from that, it's a typical synth track, and while it is a decent opener to this album, it's probably not something that you'll probably be quick to remember, but I still think it's still an okay song as it stands. There's nothing too bad or annoying about it, it's just standard. And I think you'll probably expect that for the rest of this album. Next up is Swang, which I assume is a slang for a style of dancing or something. Otherwise, the only definitions of it I could look up were the past tense of swinging and referring to steering and slowly driving a car side to side. So, yeah, it's probably just referring to a form of dance. Anyways, as for the song itself, it has this kind of late 80s hip-hop vibe to it, both its synth and its percussion. It almost sounds like kind of music you hear in the background of, say, an old 80s commercial, or like a cartoon from that era or something. Almost like a parody or a pastiche of a conventional hip-hop song. And Hell, even Philip Oakley's vocals seem to kind of emulate that sort of rapping kind of style. Lyric-wise, though, it's pretty much simple and straightforward. Constantly singing about swanging with the girls and spending the weekends just swanging back and forth. It just most of it is just constantly mentioning of how he's swanging and he wants to others to do the swang as well, even though he doesn't actually tell us how to swang or what swanging itself actually looks like. And and hell, even the chorus itself is nothing but mentioning of the word swang over and over. And if I were to, and from counting the amount of mentionings of that word across this song, it kind of adds up to a total of roughly 72 times. 72 times that word is mentioned. For a song that mentions that kind of word for that long, you'd think it would teach us how to do the swang. So yeah, if you want to listen to a fun, catchy, dancey kind of tune, you might tolerate this one fine, but if you want a more serious song from the Human League, this probably isn't exactly for you. And I'm sure a few other people might kind of agree on that. Then we have Human. It's more softer in nature compared to the previous two tracks. This was made the first single off the album, and was made technically the second Human League song to top the top 100 in Billboard after "Don't You Want Me, Baby," and that one was 5 years prior. And honestly, listen to it; it's kind of easy to see why so. This one is definitely more pop friendly, and it also kind of reminds me a bit of some of Phil Collins' work of this time, in particular something like Another Day in Paradise. In this song, Philip kind of sings about trying to fix and reunite a relationship after having been so unfaithful more than once, and how, in the end, we're all human made of flesh and blood, and we all make mistakes. That's kind of the part of human nature, as Michael Jackson would kind of put it. And as soon as he asks for forgiveness, Joanne comes in with this spoken word sequence and kind of forgives him, and in turn asks forgiveness as well, as she herself has been unfaithful. And I have to say, it's still kind of interesting. It's not always one-sided, these things. Sometimes both parties can be just as guilty as the other. And I think many people can find that relatable, especially those from separated parents and broken homes. And we'll always continue to make mistakes as long as we can learn from them. So yeah, this is probably one of the more better songs of the album, and it's not exactly all lovey-dovey serious, nor is it bright, colourful, and in your face about it. It's simple, smooth, and overall very calm, but still very emotional and very touching. It's probably one of the more underrated singles from the Human League, in my opinion. Following Human is Jam. A lot of one-word titles for these songs in this album so far. Well, anyways, this feat mainly features some Daft Punky synth as well as an overall 80s thriller kind of vibe, similar to something like Kaylee from Marillion. This is another simple song about living the nightlife and dancing and all that, similar to Swang, albeit slightly darker than that one. I still assume that the jamming here still refers to a kind of form of dancing or whatever, although a jam does often refer to a track, and jamming is often a slang for improvising in music. Or the song could be about a guy trying to get some actual jam. I wonder if that jam is raspberry. Well, anyways, this is the kind of song you'd hear play at a club late at night, or in a pub, or some kind of dance club or whatever. So if you're into that kind of late night dancey club music, I think you'd like this song kind of fine. But if you want something more bright, something more light-hearted, this may be a bit too dour for you, though its lyrics still seem to have a more fun attitude to them. Side 1 ends with Are You Ever Coming Back? This is probably one of my more favourite songs off the Crash album, mostly because of its catchy melody and its more well-balanced tone between lightheartedness and being dramatic and emotional. The track itself begins with a particular wind sound effect, not unlike something like, say, One of These Days by Pink Floyd. Then about 20 seconds in, the actual music itself starts with its simple and minimalistic nature. And the lyrics themselves seem to deal with a very mundane life and surroundings like droning engines and shattered windows, painting an almost bleak imagery, so to say. The wind sound effect doesn't exactly go away completely, occasionally appearing and fading out back again across the song. And the lyrics also seem to deal with the kind of fragility of love itself and how uncertain we could be of how things can easily fall apart, or how far away and how long we could be without communication with each other, especially in the chorus when Philip repeats the phrase of "Are you ever coming back?" kind of emphasizing that feeling of uncertainty, that almost anxiety, worrying about that this person who's been away for too long is because they don't want to speak to us anymore. Then that'd be the reason there's no response at all. And the song itself eventually ends with the same wind sound effect closing out via bookend. So, yeah. I do like songs like these. The ones that kind of combine the lightheartedness and emotional dramatic nature. And I think it goes to show what kind of songs Human League can do best. That kind of mix and tone of balance. And I think that's kind of makes me wonder why this wasn't made a single like the others. And if it was, I think it would have held up somewhat well. And it kind of upsets me a bit that this doesn't get much love and appreciation compared to other more well-known tracks from the band. Kicking off side 2, we have I Need Your Loving. Like the Sunshine, maybe? Well, not exactly like that one. This was made the second single off the album, as a lot more funkier in nature. A bit like a late-night party dance song, similar to Swang and Jam. And much like those songs, this one has also some very simple lyrics, mostly repeating their title phrase over and over, I need your loving, I need your kissing baby, with the occasional verse or line just to keep it varied enough and from being a bit too monotonous, though I wouldn't be too surprised if some people still found it so regardless. But if you don't mind that and you're just in it for the dancing and just having a light, fun, funky song to dance to, you'd probably tolerate this one fine. But to other people, this was probably one of the lower songs from the Human League, and even the band themselves have kind of dismissed it since then. And honestly, I don't find it hard to see why. You could tell this was made just to get another single out there and to just reach a certain market or demographic. Even though I don't think the song itself is all that terrible, I can still see why some people may find it too forgettable or too repetitive or just all around just derivative. And speaking of parties, the next song is named, well, Party. And just as we were starting to get song titles that weren't just one word. But oh well, no wonder this album became obscure. But anyways, this is another decent song off the album in my opinion. Most of it to do with its groovy synth riff, its punky bass, and its lyrics about offering to join in on a party. It seems more or less an attempt at a throwback to their new wave songs like Fascination and Sound of the Crowd. Even with the hasty struggles behind the scenes in the studio, I think this song deserves a bit of a chance and a bit of a more listened to and appreciation. Then we have Love on the Run. This is another brighter and more optimistic song, addressing the expected struggles of life and love, such as the years of hating and thinking that all chances are gone, while of course showing and expressing a sense of hope that there'll always be someone out there who will love you back in return, that there'll be someone to give love to, and there'll always be a reason to carry on and keep going. Even mentioning Look Back in Anger, the original play by John Osborne, 9 years before Oasis did so with Don't Look Back in Anger. The music itself helps in enhancing that hopeful tone with its bright scale, the consistent percussion, and the very bright and colourful synth, all accompanying the vocals of Philip, Susan, and Joanne. Next is Love is a Real Thing. I gotta say, between this and the ELO Living Thing song I looked at last time, a lot of bands seem to like to refer to love as a thing, be it living or real or even both. But I may digress anyways. This track still continues on the bright tones of most of the songs in this album, as well as the neo-funk nature that kind of underlines and dominates a good chunk of it. And in lyric-wise, it seems to talk about a woman who's been waiting her off for a while, reminiscing about a time she first met this particular man, and about a month later, she reaches out to him and kind of lets out and spills out her feelings to him. And of course, she says she loves him, he says he loves her, and he ends this by saying that, well, love is a real thing, as demonstrated in the chorus. And some people may get tired of yet another song about love and romance and that same old shtick, but most people out there who don't mind anyways might like this song just as well. It's another bright, colourful song by the Human League, and it's another one I think should have deserved a better chance, and I think could have been another good single had this album been a bit more successful and had more success to it and more critical positivity. And so we close out the album with Love's All That Matters. And this was pretty much the third and last single of the album, and I could hear and see why. And with that in mind, honestly, I think it's a good enough send-off to the album, in my opinion. Not just because of the fact that it's the longest song of the album at about 6-ish minutes, but also because it pretty much kind of culminates and resolves the themes of love that have been running across the album. Not just in a romance kind of sense, but also in a very make peace and love kind of way. How in the lyrics he kind of sings about love's for good and forgiving, but it's also phrased in a way that it could mean love forgiving, as in to forgive someone and, well, to keep faithful, possibly referencing the early song Human earlier in the album. And the music itself does kind of help embody and accompany that feeling of that triumphance and kind of love wins all, it conquers all. It almost kind of sounds like a national anthem in some way or another. And it eventually ends out with this very soothing pseudo-synth orchestral kind of climax before it kind of fades out and kind of closes off the album. It's honestly a really another good underrated song on the album, and considering some of the other songs I've addressed, that's probably saying something. So, in terms of final thoughts, Crushed by the Human League is very far from a perfect album. But much like with, say, Leisure by Blur, I'd be lying if I said it was a bad album. There were some good intents here, there was some heart put into it. It's just that you can tell that the Human League were kind of declining in popularity and were just kind of running themselves aground and kind of losing their touch and just kind of trying to find something to go on to, whether they should continue retreading the kind of songs they were doing or try to do something different. And with all that in mind, I would prefer to cut 'em a bit of slack and at least appreciate the album as it is as a product. I know I can understand even the most hardcore Human League fans may not be the most fond of it, and hell, even the members themselves weren't exactly fond of it, as I mentioned. But I still enjoyed some of the songs of the album, in particular Are You Ever Coming Back, and of course Love's All That Matters. So I'd be lying if I said there weren't any highlights in this, because there are some definite highlights that I would still recommend to people out there. So in all, not great, but still deserves a bit of love, and it may not be the best of crashes, but it was certainly a crash nonetheless. Next time, though, we continue looking at obscure albums in the 80s, and it's another one by Genesis.
Hello. If this message managed to reach out anyone, just to say the ground bridge has proven to be successful, but there has been some drawbacks. Just the fact, one being trying to find a way back home has proven a bit of an issue, a technical problem, bit of an understatement. So when I tried to warp back, I've ended up in this strange forest of sorts, and what seems to sound like some forms of life nearby. I don't know what, but it's starting to creep me out a bit. Hopefully, if nothing here is out for my blood and flesh, I'll probably survive this, and the review show will still continue. Hopefully. Oh my god. I wonder what could be here. Oh jeez. Oh, I'm so startled, so bloody startled.